Well, hey everyone, we're continuing in our series In Case You Missed It. And we're reflecting on the eras of our church where God has worked among us, where God has moved us, where God has revealed God's self to us, and where God has broken our hearts. And today, we're going to be reflecting on our most recent era. Actually, it's an era that...
Well, actually, as you're mentioning eras, you're wearing your Taylor Swift shirt here. And
True.
So I'm assuming that's intentional. Are we allowed to use the word eras, or is this like exclusively Taylor Swift's rights on that word at this point?
I don't think she has copyright on the word, but she's definitely in our time revived the word era. And I mean, everybody's talking about eras right now. And so it feels fitting that we should also be talking about eras.
Okay, so we get to talk about the eras of our church.
Absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely. Right. And so the era that we're talking about this morning is our most recent era. It goes back to about 2015, 2016. In many ways, we're still very much living into this era. And it's the era known as love beyond belief. And so Nate, why don't you walk us through a little bit just of the origins of how this era came to be and how this framework really began of love beyond belief?
Yeah, I think that for us as a church community, what we now call Love Beyond Belief didn't just start as a specific movement that we knew that we were going to define in this way. Mm-hmm. I think it started more simply and more personally in sort of a human way, recognizing just that within our community at Southridge, that there are people in our community who are gay, who have had experiences that have not been fully inclusive, that they have not been able to be full-fledged members of our community, that we would have different folks among us who just have family members who are in the LGBTQ plus community, or friends, or the children of friends, and just recognizing that people of different expressions of gender and sexuality, that not everybody has had the experience of welcome, but that actually there's been harm and trauma, and that a lot of people have experienced that. And it seems actually across the board that the LGBTQ plus community would experience that from the church. And we just realized that we just can't do that, and we need to actually change.
Yeah, because it was absolutely breaking our hearts. And because, like you said, it wasn't just theoretical, it was personal. And as we look at the New Testament, we knew that this was not the kind of impact that Jesus would want to have. And so as we began to stare at the impact, what was the second invitation that really stared us in the face?
I think that at that point we also realized that it's a hard conversation, partially because it's so divisive in the church. People come from different perspectives on this, and biblically rooted perspectives on gender and sexuality and marriage, and realizing that there were these different perspectives that have been so divisive in churches and would be so in ours. There's almost a fear to address this, but realizing, no, we're going to address this. This is going to be something that we need to change. Right. Is there a way to be able to do this in a way that not only is not divisive, but actually can bring a different and a new sense of unity around how we address differences in the beliefs that we hold? Right.
So we wanted to address the impact that we were having on the LGBTQ community. We wanted to address the division that was staring us in the face. And as this framework began for Love Beyond Belief, it's actually a biblical framework. So talk a little bit about how it came to be and just where we understand the rootedness in the scriptures.
Yeah, and I think last week Jeff Martins did a great job of leading us through our understanding of the scriptures as a whole, of the Bible, of the fact that it's not a flat document, but actually that the Bible and everything we see both before and after Jesus are meant to be seen through the lens of Jesus. And within that, we wanted to be able to look at what is, as you said, what's that impact that Jesus would have on the people around, on the community around him. And there's numerous places you see that throughout the entire trajectory of Jesus' life and the way that Jesus behaves and speaks. One of the places that you see that in John chapter 17, where his disciple John is writing about what he saw happen in the hours before Jesus' death. And he mentions actually a moment where Jesus is actually praying, and he's praying for John and for the other disciples. And as he's praying to God, he says this. Jesus says, "My prayer is not for them alone, for the disciples alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message." So basically us, all of those who have followed as disciples of Jesus, "that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one."
That's a powerful prayer.
And it feels so specific. And what's so interesting about it is that this is Jesus praying to God and just, basically pleading to God for something that's about our behavior. Jesus is pleading to God about our behavior.
Right. We can be the answer to this prayer.
Absolutely. This is a strange and amazing opportunity to be able to say, like, can we be an answer to Jesus' prayer, to be one and to live into that oneness that he calls for his followers. That's
so cool. And this is the last prayer recorded that we heard of Jesus giving. Yeah, in the scriptures.
Yeah, which I think just really just highlights just how much that Jesus was trying to give this to us as a lasting instruction.
Yeah. Okay, so the one part of the biblical framework is the oneness, that Jesus wants us to be one. What's the second part of the biblical framework?
I think the second part of that you see throughout the life of Jesus is something that he also alludes to and actually talks about even just a few hours prior to that in the same story that John is writing here. So in John chapter 13, John similarly talks about Jesus giving them some instructions and speaking directly to his disciples. And this is what Jesus said in John chapter 13. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And Jesus is getting so specifically into this and saying that this is the thing that I want you to hold as an identity marker.
Yeah, we read about something similar in Matthew 22, 36 to 40. Jesus is asked, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandments. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments.
Yeah, which is it's amazing that it's not just, when Jesus is praying for unity and giving the instruction for love, these aren't sort of like throwaway add-ons towards the end of his life. This was central to the entire life and teachings of Jesus. Everything that Jesus had for us to be able to see through himself, to be able to interpret the rest of Scripture, as he's saying in the passage in Matthew, was all through that framework. And I think that just gives us that opportunity just to see what Jesus is inviting us into in terms of how we love. And that the primacy of love is some of the language we want to use, that this supersedes even belief a lot of the times. And we're holding on to different kind of understandings, which I think are also important. But this elevates love over that. And I think it gives us that invitation to hold beliefs in different kinds of tensions while we understand the primacy of love.
Right. It's almost like love is like this umbrella that kind of covers everything. And so as we think about the love beyond belief framework, it's about oneness, and it's about the primacy of love, and it's about us being united in that love. So as we think about the framework, or kind of like this overarching umbrella that covers what it means to live out this posture of love beyond belief, one of the things that we talk about is disputable matters. So can you talk a little bit about the passage in Romans 14, and then just practically what that means for us as the church, and even the difference between essential beliefs and disputable matters?
Yeah, well, Jesus realistically, I think, understands when he's inviting us into love and then unity. Jesus is basically naming within that, like, if he's needing to pray for and invite unity, he knows that there's going to be differences. There were differences in Jesus' day. There were differences in the years following Jesus, and there continue to be differences now in people who are still founded on Jesus as their foundation. And so within that, Jesus is realistically saying, you're going to have differences. But what do we do with that? And I think that Paul gives us some really good language for that when he was experiencing some differences that the church in Rome were experiencing not too long after Jesus' own time. And Paul uses the language right at the beginning of Romans chapter 14, the language of disputable matters. And he basically is telling the church not to be disunified, but to be able to recognize that some of the things that are threatening to tear them apart should be seen as disputable matters. Don't let these things that can be disputable, that can be held in a different way, that can be held in tension, break us apart. And I think that language is really helpful for us because I think it gives us the opportunity to know that that's actually okay. I think it's actually not only okay, I think it's actually good.
Paul talks about having a conviction.
Well, and I think
have a conviction and honor the conviction of the other.
Well, and exactly. And I think that allows for that for us to be able to honor each other by being in unity. I know Jesus himself as a teacher, as a rabbi, within the rabbinic tradition of Jesus' time and in the years following Jesus' time, the rabbis really strongly modeled actually what that looks like. There's a book that's called the Talmud, and the Talmud that was developed over the subsequent centuries is basically a book of kind of disagreements.
Yeah.
And these are disagreements that are held in tension, and it's for the purpose of holding them in tension
Right.
and honoring God and honoring each other by the ways that we really get into conversation, see each other's perspectives. And I think that that's really important for us to be able to see that the idea of disputable matter is not just sort of a concession,
Yeah.
but it's actually an invitation for the ways that we interact with each other as followers of Jesus, and can hold different beliefs, but in unity.
And it requires a lot of maturity. It requires us to be brave. It requires us to be curious, to be learners, to be listening.
Yeah.
It requires just a lot of mutual respect. And so for somebody who maybe is coming into the conversation today, and this is really brand new, this posture of love beyond belief and what it means to have and hold a conviction and to live this out in a framework of unity and love where you can consider some of these convictions disputable. Can you just describe what would the difference between disputable and essential be?
Yeah. Well, I think it sounds like as we lean further into, again, everything through the lens of Jesus and who Jesus is.
Right.
Again, Jeff Martins last week highlighted the passage in 1 Corinthians 3:11,
Right.
where Paul is basically inviting the church to understand what is all of this all about as followers of Jesus. And he really does center it back onto the person of Jesus when he says that there is no other foundation than that which has been laid, which is Jesus Christ.
Yep.
And the idea there, and even in our own Anabaptist history, that was the favorite passage of Menno Simons, who was one of the leaders who kind of really 500 years ago basically named that all of the things that we do, all of the things that we're meant to be all about are filtered through and founded on the foundation, which is Jesus. And so when we talk about essential, what is essential is Jesus, seeing everything through the lens of Jesus. Even in the years following the early years of the church, over the subsequent centuries, again, there was sort of the development of what are some of those essential things that are just so intertwined with the person of Jesus that if we're followers of Jesus, these ones are essential for us. And we, for example, have this Apostles' Creed that has these 12 points that all have to do with the person of God, with Jesus, with the Holy Spirit coming from Jesus, the experiences of Jesus. And those things are essential. If we're going to call ourselves followers of Jesus, this has to do with essential pieces of what it means to follow Jesus.
Right.
But beyond that foundation, I think there is that opportunity again to lean into the disputability of a lot of the things that are not that don't have to do with our with our exact followership of Jesus, with what it means to be discipled by Jesus, which are still beliefs that we would hold, beliefs that we would look into the Bible to understand more of, that we would see culturally, but that based on that foundation in Jesus, we can actually hold as non-essential to the core elements of our faith and can be disputable.
Right. What would an example be of just a modern day conversation in the church where we can actually live out this posture of having disputable matters among us?
Well, because we're so good at disagreement, there's a lot of those that we have as a church. But I think that
for the sake of today, pick a few.
Okay. I think that one that stands out is the fact that even for the last 500 years and ongoing to this day, something like baptism would be considered, I think, a disputable matter. Yeah. It's something where, again, sort of at the early stages of the kind of our shape of church and as Anabaptists, where 500 years ago, around the time of the Reformation, there was that question of infant baptism and adult believer baptism, where the idea was for a lot of followers of Jesus, it was baptizing your infant into a life of faith. And the idea was that they're being baptized into followership of Jesus. And then there was the question of, for the Anabaptists to emerge, of saying, well, shouldn't we be doing that as adults?
Right.
And they're saying, well, that should be an adult conviction. And over the years, that was held in tension. And a lot of times, at the time, 500 years ago, this was a life or death question.
Totally.
And to this day, we still have people who hold those different convictions. We'd hold people who hold them biblically, who would say, well, this is why I think that it should be an infant baptism framework for us. And others who would say, well, no, that needs to be an adult believer's baptism. But that's something that we actually see can be held in tension, that can be held as a disputable matter. Even within our church at Southridge, we would have people who have come from different backgrounds and would hold that differently and would have had that different experience, having been baptized as infants or as adults. And we hold that together, and we actually think that that's okay. And we actually think it's not only interesting, but important for us to hear from each other. Well, what's your perspective on that? Where did you come from? Without actually breaking our fellowship, our community over that question.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, and as we think about marriage, of course, we can apply this to whether you hold an affirming view or a traditional view of marriage. So talk about that and what that means and what that looks like.
Well, I think even like saying that, like there would be some folks who would immediately want to get into that and say, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And there'd be some folks who would feel that, I don't know if we can hold that disputably. And that actually kind of speaks to some of the disputability of the question of marriage. And that's definitely been one that's been relevant to this conversation about gender and sexuality in our LGBTQ plus community and inclusion in the church.
Yeah.
And for us wanting to be able to recognize that, there are actually different perspectives in this belief, that this is actually a belief and it is actually important. It's not essential to our faith, but it is actually something that people hold as a part of their faith and our faith. And come to different conclusions on that, where you'd have folks coming to an affirming perspective. Affirming being, I would like to affirm that there are different expressions of gender and sexuality that can work within a marriage context, that actually is valid in the same way as a heterosexual marriage. And would be able to say, okay, here's biblically the argument that I would actually put to that, and here's how I would describe that. And there are other folks who would hold to a traditional view of marriage and would say, well, this is what I grew up with, and this is what I would continue to actually believe.
Right.
And for us, we want to be able to be a community that actually would say, we can hold both of those. There are people who are going to hold those on different sides of that discussion, but actually we can do that in a healthy way. And that actually it's important for us to be able to say, we love each other. We are still followers of Jesus together in the community, despite holding that differently. That we're not asking people who would have an affirming perspective to say, you know what, actually, can you dial that back?
Yes.
We at this point actually have the opportunity to say, no, yes, we fully embrace that perspective.
You can fully live into and live out that posture.
Live out that posture.
Absolutely.
But also in the traditional side of things, that you can still fully understand and hold on to that without needing to make the curve of, actually coming to an affirming perspective. We can actually hold those in tension in a healthy way.
That's beautiful. Again, under under this umbrella of oneness and under the primacy of love.
Absolutely.
Right? So as we look forward, thinking about our church real time today, what does that mean for us as a church? Like, how is love beyond belief something that we can live into more of right now, today?
I mean, we started the conversation with recognizing the kind of human impact.
Yeah.
And so if we were recognizing that human impact on the people in our community, who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, or people who are beyond that in different ways. I mean, when we're starting to from a place of like the harm that we do and have done as Christians, and that a lot of that has stemmed from exclusion.
Right.
The first part of this for us is just that at this point, we want to be able to now lean into the very early stages and then just continue on just generationally leaning into having a completely different impact.
Right.
We know that takes time, but we also know that if we can start from a full posture of inclusion, and that we're doing that in our actions and our posture towards each other, and even through the ways that people from the LGBTQ plus community can participate, which
fully, completely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Whether that's in getting married, whether that's in different forms of leadership and volunteering, and that in a full sense of being able to participate, that's a reality for us now.
Yeah.
And that we want to be able to lean into that more in just our loving posture, that hopefully that the impact itself can be different, starting from that place of just taking those walls down.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, and so again, kind of going back to where we started, we want to address the impact problem. We want to have a different kind of impact. Can you also speak to, we talked earlier about the division, the polarization in the church. As we really live out this love beyond belief posture, what can that mean for us in terms of division and polarization?
Well, the hope is, like we said, instead of avoiding it because it's causing division, and instead of saying, well, we're going to lean into this anyway and it's going to cause division, the hope for us has actually been, well, is there actually a different way? Is there a way where the things that have been divisive actually becomes something that strengthens us. And I think that there's something in that where there's strength in diversity, and we see that in the body of Christ, in the invitation to be different parts of the body of Christ, and that's how it functions as a whole.
Right.
And I think for us at this point, what we intend to lean into, and what we are leaning into, and we've actually seen some really beautiful examples of, is in the diversity of perspective, we actually strengthen each other. That we actually see different parts of the image of Jesus,
Right.
of the face of Jesus, where if we're just in our own perspective, we're seeing a part of that. But I think in our diversity, we actually get to see more of the image of Jesus.
I love that.
Be the body of Christ more together. And I think that extends actually beyond just this conversation, but it
Totally.
actually can become a framework for, different things start to emerge that we, again, we're
Yeah.
really good at having disagreements.
Yeah.
Some of the other, disagreements that have even cropped over the last while.
Yeah.
Right? We were talking earlier about with COVID.
Totally. How we navigated COVID, all different, maybe how different approaches to parenting.
Yeah.
There's so many things that we can, politics, whatever, that you can actually lean into this posture and live this out. Because again, it comes right back to the prayer that Jesus prayed for oneness for the church and the primacy of love. And if we can really lean into both of those, amazing.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
And if we're going to be completely
Yeah.
centered on Jesus,
Yeah.
if we're going to have Jesus as our lens for everything else, like you're saying, I just love that. The primacy of love and the life and teachings of
Yeah.
Jesus, and that prayer that he had for us that we get to be an answer to.
Yeah.
Can we be unified as we
Totally.
enact love together and through
Yeah.
our diversity? That I think is the heart of this love
That's
beyond
the heart of
belief.
love beyond belief.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us. Hope you've been inspired and maybe learned something new about this era in our church, or maybe you were a part of this era and you've just been kind of re-inspired to what it means to really live this out. And so thank you for taking this trip down memory lane, in a sense, with us, not just to look at the past, but of course to look to the future. And join us next week as we're going to be imagining where God is going to lead us from here. So take care, everyone.